It's David Walsh here from Zoo Advisors. We will be getting started in just a couple more minutes or a minute or two. Let some other people join, but glad you could be here today. I'm going to get started now that Jackie has joined, who is going to co-facilitate along with me. So welcome again. I'm David Walsh, and welcome to our ongoing series of community conversations. This one is on what have we learned. It should be a great conversation, and we have a number of panelists who I will introduce in a few minutes. I'm also joined on the call with at least two of our colleagues. I don't know if Eric is on yet, but Zach Winfield from the Zoo Advisors team, as well as Kathy Wagner. I encourage you to use the chat function if you have questions or other information or resources you would like to share throughout the call. We will then transcribe that information and send it out with a summary of the session today, so that you'll get that next week. So please feel free to use that chat. We'll be monitoring it here as we go along. So again, welcome. And we're about at the 6-month mark of the, I would say, the mess that we're in, at least here in the East Coast. I'm about at the 6-month or 25-week mark. I know on the West Coast in Seattle, you have a couple extra weeks on us. I know you pride yourself on being first.
David, thanks.
It's a little longer out there, but I'm sure none of us thought we would be in this place even 6 months ago, and none of us really know where we're going or what's going to be happening 6 months from now. But to say the least, it's been an interesting time for all of us, with lots of lessons learned, things we've seen, things we probably want to do differently. For me, myself, my luggage has surely taken a break. I've been on a plane twice in the last 6 months, which is about a tenth of what I would usually do in 6 months. Pretty unusual, but have enjoyed the time at home. And over the course of the 6 months, we've really pumped out a lot of content, which you've seen, anything from the PPP and how to get federal funding to how to stay on mission. We've done over 20 webinars and had 2,500 registrants in those webinars. And I thought personally, I'd like to add that one of the things that has kept me sane over the last 6 months is I've run every day. So that's actually how I've counted how many days. It's been 174 days of running. I've run an equivalent of 1,250 miles up to Mount Everest, 60,000 foot elevation gain. And yes, it is a bit crazy, and I don't recommend it to anybody, but it's been my way of getting through the pandemic. And so far I'm standing. As many of you know, I have a standing desk, and still standing here. But in talking to lots of people, I've heard many of the frustrations, the fears, and some of the real worries about what's happened and what's still to come. But more importantly, I've seen a lot of the silver linings, the extra time with family. I've had the personal gift of having two of our grown kids here quarantining with us. That's been a real gift. The sharing of ideas and resources, and just the support and the support network that's really been built and has grown. Through it all, I've really seen the good in a lot of folks, a lot of people. So before I open it up to the panelists and introduce panelists, I wanted to share a couple of the things that of my lessons learned, and some of what I've seen. The first is we are much more creative and innovative than any of us knew. I've seen, and I know you've seen, some really creative programs and events come out of this. I read yesterday that the Little Rock Zoo is doing a laser light show in their parking lot in lieu of a Halloween event. Zoo Knoxville last week did a virtual gala, which is becoming a thing, but they sent out craft cocktails and designer floral arrangements to people that bought tickets. A couple months ago, I saw Elmwood Park Zoo did their giraffe-a-thon, where for a donation, you got to feed the giraffes virtually. So a lot of creativity. The other thing I've seen is we can move quickly when we need to. I don't think any of us knew we could pivot to online ticketing as quickly as we all did, and how quickly we moved a lot of our education programs virtually. So two of the positives. On the flip side of the lessons learned, I think all of us would say our financial reserves probably weren't what they should be, even if we had significant financial reserves. They probably aren't enough. And looking forward, how do we continue to build stronger financial reserves? And the other thing is our business models may need to be adjusted. As I shared in one of our previous webinars, I like this quote from Warren Buffett: "It's only when the tide goes out that you learn who's been swimming naked." And clearly, I think we need to make sure that we have the right business models, the right operating models, and take a closer look at how to improve them. So those were just a couple of the highlights that I had. What I'd like to do now is introduce our panelists. As I said, joined by Dr. Jackie Ogden, who is a member of our team and who's been invaluable in sharing her wisdom and ideas, both with our team, but also with the AZA community. Then with Becca Hanson from Studio Hanson Roberts out on Bainbridge Island in Washington. Shareen Knowlton from Roger Williams Park Zoo. Richard Glover from Space Center Houston, and Charles Hopper from Seattle Aquarium. So a great group of people, both at zoos and aquariums, but also outside. And so I'd like to first start with Jackie. I'm gonna take it off the screen here and stop sharing a minute. Bear with me 1 second. There we go. And open it up to Jackie for some of what she has seen in terms of her lessons and perspectives over the last 6 months. Jackie.
Thank you very much, David. And it is really wonderful to see all of you. And thanks for letting us see everybody in, David. It's really great. So boy, as David said, what a time. And, we've seen people just flourish, and we've seen, but everybody I know is struggling in some way. And a few weeks ago, I heard somebody say something about, well, when we get through this, everything's going to be different, and we're not going back to the way that we were, and a lot of things are going to change. And we've all heard that. But somehow or other, this time it stuck, because right now a lot of things don't stick, but that one stuck. And I went, oh my God, that is true. Things are going to change. No kidding. I know that's not rocket science. We've all figured that out. But oh my God, if things are going to change, we'd better help change them. Because, for me, how I get through things is by finding meaning in them. And even if it doesn't exist, I try to find it. And so I was thinking, boy, if we get to the end of this period and things have changed, and they haven't changed in a way that helps us further what we want to do, then we're going to feel really silly, and B, shame on us. And I would say shame on us, realizing that it's not as if anybody has time to be thinking about the future right now. We're all just trying to survive. But I will say, as I started thinking about this and started thinking about, so what would that future be like? I went, well, this is actually kind of helpful to think about something a bit more positive and forward thinking. And so I'm just encouraging everybody to think that way and to figure out how we can help our community as a whole really be part of what that future is like moving forward. So, and I am, for want of a better phrase, calling it Plan C, because I have this wonderful mug. Many of you know Beth Stevens, and Beth gave me this great mug just before my husband passed away that said, life is all about how you handle Plan B. So I figured before all of this, we were in Plan A, which is when everything is happy and kind of like being at Disney. And then Plan B is where we are right now, which some days you can find moments of joy, but often it just sucks. And then Plan C is sort of how I'm thinking about the future and the new tomorrow and how we can help co-create that. So David, that's what I've been thinking about.
Very good. Thanks, Jackie.
To where I unpack, how I unpack in my condo.
That's good. In your renovated or soon to be renovated kitchen.
Yeah, soon to be renovated kitchen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll stay on the West Coast and go up to Charles over at the Seattle Aquarium. And Charles, your perspectives and lessons learned over the last 6 months.
Yeah, thanks, David. First, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with our colleagues over this platform. So I appreciate it. And as you know, hearing Jackie talk and hearing some of your earlier comments, it really makes me think on a personal level, you know, just how resilient we are as individuals. And, you know, we've shown a great ability to figure out how to adapt in this time. And personally, I think it's been a real strengths finding moment where you can find out where the areas of growth are needed, or, you know, some of the, if in hindsight, if you look at where we were at in March and where we're at now, you can see how you've developed. And so I've appreciated this time to reflect, to really look at my own personal growth. But then when I look at the organization, I think there's, you know, the same themes that come out of that as an organization. You know, we look at, you know, the financial makeup of our structure. And, you know, for us, particularly at the Seattle Aquarium, we're heavily reliant on gate and attendance to be a functioning organization and to really operate the way we want to engage our audience and to reach the folks that we're trying to reach with our mission and conservation messaging. And without that revenue coming in, as we've seen across all the other organizations, it's a real challenge and it's a real struggle. And so, you know, looking at ways to diversify that income stream have been, you know, central themes. So that's been a lesson learned of you know, looking at not being so heavily reliant on one source. And once you get into that space, you kind of have to figure out, well, what are the opportunities for us? This isn't the way we've normally operated. And so being kind of nimble in that space. Also looking at, you know, another thing, lesson learned that's come up and has been a topic of discussion has been, you know, on the employment side of things, you know, how do we take care of our most valued assets, right? Which are our daily contributors to the mission that come into the doors and give of their time every day and of their resources, the risk we ask them to take when we reopen our doors, the opportunities that we give for them to engage and the passion they bring to their work environment every day. How do we retain those individuals as they still need to provide for their families? What are we doing as an organization to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward and creating the safest work environment and also the safest guest experience for them to engage? And so, you know, it's really an eye-opening. I'll stop short there because I think, you know, there's so much that you can say about that. It's really an eye-opening kind kind of experience that we're going through, that's making us really take a magnifying glass and look at what we take for granted sometimes. I'm not saying we always take this for granted, but things, that seem normal in a solvent situation now are, some of our most precious assets, our guests and our employees and our guests. We have to figure out how to, make sure we're taking care of both ends of that spectrum.
That's great. Thanks, Charles. Becca, about another perspective from the West.
We've got Seattle followed by Seattle. Charles, it's nice to meet you. We need to get together. So I'm a designer, and we only work on zoos and aquariums, supporting all of you guys out there that are engaged in the coalface of all the work on this. And so it's a little different perspective from us, but what's been really interesting to me this year is we started setting up this year to be a very different year, in September last year. And so we were beginning to prepare the office for the fact that my husband and I, who's one of my partners, we're going to start stepping away from management of the firm, not retiring by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, forget that. But stepping away from the day-to-day stuff. And so we started working with everybody, and we went through a strengths finder workshop with everyone and looked at the strengths that were in the firm. What are we going to do in order to set the firm up for success in particularly 2021? So we were looking at the year 2020 as a year to really begin to do things differently and not take anything for granted. We put people into coaching. We've changed a bunch of office practices in the meantime. And lo and behold, what happened in February? Then it came face to face with having to change everything. And so to everyone's credit in our firm, we were ready to change. We were ready to pivot because we had balanced so well everybody's thinking. And it happened rather rapidly. And so we were able to take care of everyone in the firm. We were able to take care of all of our clients. We were able to take on new projects as we came through this. And we were able to deal with all of the training that was needed in order to continue to reach out. And it has been a real testimonial, if you will, to everybody's resilience in this. Parents dealing with kids. We had the whole office, all 12 of us, working from our kitchens and our second bedrooms and still keeping, CAD and all of those other programs going, and then learning what Zoom and Teams really meant in order to keep teams together. So, the way we approach things is communicating with our clients, deeply communicating with our clients, and empathy comes out really strongly in that, being in your shoes as we're working with you. And so the work that we had done with clients before to try to really be close to them really paid off in buckets, because everybody was attuned to one another. But it also made apparent to us some of the real challenges that you have when you are creating new relationships and you have to do it digitally. And so we haven't quite cracked that one yet, but we're working on that. So I think, we're in a really good place, a very thoughtful place, one where we are open to so many changes then, and working with all of the client teams that we have and all of the professionals out there to go, how do we do this better? Because we're very clear that our work from here on out is going to be very different than what we've done in the past. So it kind of feels good.
That's great. Thanks for that very optimistic, upbeat take, Becca, as always. We'll head south to Houston and Richard Glover at Space Center Houston. Richard comes with the what I call the outside-inside perspective of being on the outside of the AZA community at the moment, but having spent many years within the AZA community. So Richard, your perspectives from down south.
Well, it's definitely been a fascinating time and a very demanding time, both personally and professionally. I think, one of the things that really has stood out is how relentless and how exhausting this has all been. and really keeping the perspective that that's not just me, that's everybody. And everybody's got things they're going through beyond work. And so, you know, as Becca used the word, and it's really one of the key things to me is empathy. I think as leaders, we really have to work hard every day at being conscious about thinking about our teams as people, not just as workers, and really relating to them and talking to them about things beyond just the work, connecting with them on a personal level. You know, I think people just need that connection, and they also need a lot of affirmation. I mean, I find during this time, a compliment, a kind word, you know, really anything you can do that makes someone feel just a little better makes such a huge difference. And it's something that I take a little too much for granted normally in a normal situation. If the team accomplishes something, I'm quick to praise them, but on that individual level, I don't necessarily go out of my way as much as I probably should to do that. And this time has really reminded me why that's important to those individual workers, because there are a lot of people from day to day that just don't know how they're going to go on for the next day. They just don't feel like engaging. They don't want to be part of it. They're frustrated. And so those moments and those words and having those real human connections beyond just the work are so important right now. The other thing that has been really reinforced to me is the importance of data. I can't say enough how important at a time like this to be really finding out what are your guests and your potential guests thinking? What are your employees thinking? Understanding their needs and pivoting based on those needs. Things are changing so fast, and from market to market, it's different. You know, here in Houston, COVID-19 is still a giant mess. We're one of those places that just continues to stay at high levels with our hospitals full for months on end. And you know, that really impacts how people view what they can do here. And we're finding we're actually getting more out-of-town visitors than we are getting local people, even though we're one of the largest markets in the country, because people here are so scared to do things in general. But those from week to week, all that changes. I would say, I'm just going to make a plug here. If anyone isn't already, you should all be following Colleen Dillenschneider's blog, Know Your Own Bone. It is a great source of data for the industry, for all attractions, and getting a sense for visitors, attitudes, especially the attitudes towards when they feel comfortable coming back to visit, what makes them feel comfortable coming to visit. So I think those things are really important, but I also think, you know, we've been doing a lot of surveying of our team periodically to get their comfort levels to see what operational changes we need to make sure they're also comfortable as well as our guests. So I think bearing all those in mind, there's never a time where data isn't important, but I think right now when things are changing so rapidly, it's just so much more so. And so many of us have, you know, surveys that are being done. You know, how many of us have the Moray survey that's being done of our guests? But how many of us are actually taking that data and doing the analysis and making the changes we need to make based on it? And that's what's really important. And also even just looking at that survey, if you haven't during this time, and going, we need to change some questions to reflect safety and add those in to make sure that we're capturing that information. So I just want to reinforce how important that is, and encourage everybody to really take a look at the data you are collecting and use it, because that tends to be the biggest mistake a lot of organizations make, is they collect a lot of data and then no one has the time to actually sit down and can do the analysis and then communicate it through the leadership team and through the rest of the team. On a personal note, I think the thing that's probably stood out to me the most is learning to give myself a little bit of forgiveness, that not every day I'm going to be at my best, and I may be cranky and I may snap a little at someone and I'm going to need to apologize to them for it. But I have to be okay with the fact that going through this, none of us are going to be perfect. And, you know, I think as leaders, a lot of us hold ourselves to a very high standard, and giving yourself that forgiveness is really important, and giving yourself moments to just get out of all of it, get a little bit into nature, connect with your friends, but just, you know, be able to let yourself have moments not as a leader, and when you are as a leader, have moments that you're weak and be okay with it.
Great advice, Richard. Really good thoughts. And we'll head to East Coast there with Shareen in Providence at Roger Williams Park Zoo.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And thank you again for hosting these. These are fantastic, and they've been really valuable throughout this entire period. I think the benefit of going last is that I can start by saying I want to echo a lot of what my colleagues have said. You all hit on points that were front and center in my mind as I was thinking about some of these questions. So what I'm going to do is probably paraphrase some of what you said and kind of draw some links between some of the things that you said. The first thing that I feel like has really become important to me as we've gone through this whole period and to my organization is thinking really intentionally about how we show up for our communities. So both the folks that would be coming, to our zoos and aquariums, and what is our relevance to them as they all go through this period, but then also looking at our internal community. So this goes back to what some of you had already touched on in terms of how do we show up for each other within our teams. One of the things that this pandemic has done is blurred the lines between sort of work life and home life. And so I think for the first time, we've been sort of forced to authentically recognize each other as whole people. We always ask people to bring their whole person to work. We ask our teams to bring their whole person to work. But I don't know that we've always done a great job at acknowledging folks in that manner and recognizing what their needs might be in that manner. So this has really put us all in a position where we've had to, shift our thinking on that. So I think that's been one big takeaway and one big lesson is thinking about how we show up for our teams, our internal communities. And then I think the second thing, and some of you had touched on this, is, none of us were built to sustain sort of this crisis mode mentality and way of operating for this kind of duration and indefinitely, right? We don't know what our timelines look like on so many of these things. So how do we mitigate against the challenges that poses to us as people, as individuals? And so for me, I'm a planner and I like to know, what I'm doing short-term, mid-term, long-term, and I've had to throw a lot of that out the window, just like all of us have. And so focusing in on the things that we can plan for and control, and acknowledging the things that we can't and being okay with that, but having those pieces that we can, sort of plan for and organize and control in place, I know for me serves as sort of a touchstone when I'm dealing with some of the stuff that's less known. And I've tried to provide that for my team as well. So, being really intentional and mindful about the things that I can get lined up in a row. Because those things can serve as touchstones for folks that need those kinds of anchors right now when so many things feel, like constant, one pivot and then the next pivot and one thing flying at us after another. And then I think the next thing I wanted to touch on that a lot of you mentioned is, a lot of us are focusing on the day-to-day and putting out the fires and on, the finances and making sure that we are doing things on a daily basis that will sustain us and keep us going. But I've really, and folks within our organization, I think have done a good job with really still trying to keep a connection, an intent, and I keep using the word intentional, but an intentional connection to the mission. Again, for a lot of folks within my team, bringing things back to that has served as almost like a beacon and an anchor for them. So, as we're constantly, running around trying to accomplish things in the day-to-day to satisfy the demands of these, crazy realities, having that as part of how we're looking at things and connecting things back to the mission and connecting things back to the why, not losing sight of our why, can feel very reassuring and hopeful. And I think a lot of us, again, going back to this extended crisis mode that we find ourselves in, having that why and having that hope is very important, because if not, it can feel overwhelming. So again, it helps mitigate against some of that. And then the last thing I wanted to say, and I think this is a Glen Ellen, I'm not going to be able to say it, Doyle thing, but we can do hard things. You know, a lot of the stuff that we didn't think we could do before, whether it's shifting to online ticketing, whether it's shifting to virtual programming, you know, all of these different things that we didn't think we had the capacity to do, we can do, and we're doing really well. That every day. But if we step back to really look at everything we've accomplished over this, you know, we should feel proud, and we should, you know, acknowledge and celebrate what we have been able to accomplish. Because again, it doesn't always feel that way in the moment. But stepping back and taking that perspective, I've also found really helpful.
Thanks, Shareen. Really great points by everybody. The empathy comment that several of you mentioned seems so right on. And I love how you said recognizing the whole person. I just saw a post yesterday on LinkedIn about someone doing an interview, and you know, the person being interviewed, their daughter, their little baby was like crawling around. And the interviewer said, you know, take the time and pick up the baby and hold the baby. And they did the interview with the child on the person's lap. And what was really interesting to see all the comments on the LinkedIn post, you know, and how this is a new time for all of us. And we have to recognize that it is that we're all balancing a lot of different things, and we've always balanced all of these different things, but it's just it's literally now in our face as we watch, you know, on people's screens and get that view into people's homes. So looking at that whole person has always been important, but now it's even more important. Wanted to ask the question, and Jackie had written a blog post that we shared a week or two ago about her plan C and about the silver linings that have come out of the pandemic in the last 6 months, and some of the things that she would like to see stick. And so I'll toss it to Jackie and then open it up to the panelists to see kind of what are those things that they want to make sure continue even after we get through this. Jackie?
Thank you. So first, great comments from the panelists, really, really wonderful. And so some of the things I'm going to say will just reiterate what you said, so I won't go on about them, but one would be this piece about empathy and just really a different kind of leadership. I mean, I think that we've seen that the people that have really succeeded, whether it's the Prime Minister of New Zealand or whomever, they're really the people that show up with vulnerability and show up with empathy. And so my hope is really that sticks and that we maintain that kind of leadership going forward within our community, but also more broadly. The sort of related piece to that would be heart. And you know, I think, and it goes back, it is part of the empathy and vulnerability, but boy, you know, you actually hear people talking about loving each other now. And it's like, oh God, can we really do that at work? Well, yeah, we can. So, because that certainly is how I like to lead, is with my heart. And so then following from that is that I think when you lead from your heart, it's easier to take risks. As long as you're comfortable leading from your heart. And so this gets back to some of what Shareen was talking about, I think, in terms of, well, everybody talked about in terms of sort of the innovation that we've seen, the changes that people have been able to make, that they've been able to make really fast, that they've been able to just do. I just hope that we maintain that level of risk-taking and courage going forward and in everything that we do. And then I think probably the final piece would be really about social equity. You know, we are in such a bizarre, different time in so many ways. For me, one of the great things that is happening, although, you know, how it plays out politically is challenging, but is how much we're paying attention to social equity finally. And I mean, we've got a giant, long way to go. And I know I personally do. But boy, do I hope that we stick with this and that we pay attention within the AZA community, that we really pay attention to how our heritage plays out, because we have kind of crappy heritage in this way. Excuse my language, sorry. I swear more during the pandemic, by the way, than I used to. So I hope that we pay attention to that history and that we very thoughtfully and strategically move beyond that, that history. So.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. How about any of the panelists and things that you'd like to see stick that have that have come out of the last 6 months?
Well, if I can jump in for just a second, you know, we wind up working all over the United States and all over the world. And so that means we're dealing with people constantly who share different cultural biases, expectations, and environments than we do. And so we're constantly having to adjust ourselves to those. And one of the things that we have learned over the years is just the power of being attuned to one another, being quiet, taking the time to listen and understanding that there are so many different ways of solving the same problem, and to honor those. So, you know, after 9/11 happened, I almost immediately got back on planes again in order to get to project sites. And I remember how grateful people were when I would arrive, or even at the airport, or just, you know, in the taxi cabs. People were so pleased to see you and so thankful. And you always heard the word thank you. And you heard people take the time of day with one another to be considerate. And I thought at that time, oh, please, dear Lord, don't let this change. And yet it did. You know, we all kind of went back to normal then, but I don't think it was the same normal. I think, you know, there've been some residual effects from that. And I look at this as another opportunity too, to this slowing down that we've all had to do as we pivot. And then, not, you know, I hate that word because it gets used so much, but that's the only thing that describes how we've been able to make these changes. But the ability to take the time to honestly look at one another in the eye, to be authentic about that whole life experience that we have, and being grateful that we've got this moment, and to say thank you. Thank you every day to everyone. Mean it, but also don't be afraid, you know, as you were saying, Richard, don't be afraid to say I'm sorry. It goes hand in hand. I think one of the hardest lessons I had to learn with my husband was to let him be right. And so I used to deal with this phrase of, I was so wrong and you are so right. And once I learned to say that, then the world opened up for me to be able to listen to people and to not have to be right, which I have needed a lot in my past. So that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Becca. Charles or Richard, Shareen, any thoughts on that? The topic of silver linings and what will stick?
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit. And Becca, great. I think that was incredible. You know, and Jackie, you both, to be reflective and add that human component and be mindful of that, and just kind of going down that same thought path. I think we've been forced, and this goes back to my earlier comment on, you know, understanding the makeup of, and the fabric of the Seattle Aquarium. You know, we've been forced to rethink a lot of things, and reduced capacity is one of those things that is just a necessity to operate at this point. But what it has made us do is shift the way we engage our audience, because we still want to bring that content to the folks that can't get a ticket or can't access us. And this theme of access starts to, you know, be magnified a little bit more. And it's something that I think we say within, you know, our kind of our diversity, equity, inclusion, and access agendas. But, you know, now we've been forced to really, you know, reconcile that, and the hand's been forced a bit because it's a necessity. But I think the feedback has been so positive, and the silver lining is within the reinforced of good behavior, right? We have an opportunity to look at how this is really impacting our remote learners, the students that are at home that need to engage in different ways. I think what we'll see is, you know, as Zoom fatigue continues to go throughout the school year for for these, these different environments of how we engage. My hope is that we don't move away from having this content available and really having an initiative that allows different individuals who may not be able to either afford a ticket, get to the aquarium, get to our different attractions. We still keep a component of availability. And again, going back to that theme of being more human and understanding that we're all in different parts of this experience and this journey. How do we continue to make sure that our mission is reachable or accessible to anyone? And I think that's a silver lining that I've seen come out of this, but also something that I hope sticks.
Okay, great thought, Charles. Shareen, any thoughts you'd like to add?
All of it, everything that they've said. I think that it's interesting that the one thing that we're all talking about is how we are grateful now in this period in ways that we might not have been before, and also recognizing, just the human element of what it is that we do every day. And I don't want those things to go away. Those are things that it strikes me that we weren't as, those things weren't as front and center, before. And maybe that's some of what's led us to some of the challenges that we have. And so now that, now that these are things that we're talking about openly and frequently, I hope that we retain all of that.
That's great. Richard, anything you'd like to add on that topic?
Yeah, I just another silver lining to me has been really the extraordinary number of people who have connected with nature that weren't before. So many people are getting out and doing things. State parks are overrun. They can't keep boats in stock to sell them. They can't keep RVs in stock to sell them. I think it represents a real opportunity for, we're basically a room full of conservationists, and people connecting with nature that way that so many of them weren't before gives us an opportunity to speak to them in a way that may connect that it didn't before. So I think that's one of the silver linings is people have really started to say, hey, I'm tired of being inside. I want to be outside. I want to be in nature. I want to, do something else and be somewhere safe. And I think that's the other part of it is preserving places like that they can do something safe. That's one of our really important messages that we need to be talking about right now. So to me, that's one of the silver linings.
That's great.
Richard, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it is such a golden opportunity, silver lining and golden opportunity at the same time, because zoos have always, or they have been seen as taking care of nature someplace else. And we now have the opportunity to crack open that 4-fee wall around our institutions and both let our institutions out and welcome the community in a way that helps take care of nature in the places where they live, because we know it has meaning to those communities. So to not act on that and to let others take that place for us would seem to me such a wasted opportunity.
Thanks, Becca. I started off by talking about some of the innovations that I've seen. What are some of the things that you've seen either at your own facilities or at others in terms of innovative programs, strategies? What's happening out there from an innovation standpoint?
Well, I could jump in. Kind of radio silence there, so I had mine ready to go. I think one of the coolest things I saw was the Cal Academy. I've always been a fan of their programming and the way they engage their audience. And Nightlife has been a big series for them, and I'm sure a big revenue stream over the years. But and they deliver that weekly. But they had to Becca, to use the word you're not so fond of, they had to pivot on a dime for that. And they were able to engage their audience, within the first couple of weeks of, closing their doors. They brought a remote nightlife experience. And I just thought that was really unique and really cool, the way they've done that. And for us, we've looked at different ways of allowing folks that were going to book events with us, trying to bring them a virtual version of that, and kind of riding off that nightlife theme in the way they've done it. So we haven't cracked the code on that quite yet, but I think definitely inspired by our colleagues over at the Cal Academy. So hats off to them for being creative on at a moment's notice.
Good.
I'll jump in. I think it's really, it's run the gamut. Some of the things that Charles had mentioned, and again, Becca, that word pivot comes to mind. Just seeing folks shift gears, and whether it's been with drive-through experiences or reimagining their events, taking their programming virtual. We have a big Jack-o'-lantern spectacular fundraiser that we do every year. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year. And we are recreating that as a drive-through event. And we were able to learn from a lot of our colleague institutions and how they handle drive-through opportunities, and been able to apply that to our own situation. Our annual Brew at the Zoo event, which is another big and very popular fundraiser, we converted to a Brew in the Box event where people got to pick up a curated box of 6 different beers, a really fun T-shirt that kind of gave a nod to the COVID reality, but also the whole beer theme. And then we created a bunch of online content to kind of replicate the kind of fun experiences in a virtual environment that they would have had if they were strolling around the zoo with their beer. So, again, just trying to rethink things and find what it is that folks get out of the different resources and programming that we provide, and then figuring out how to adapt them to this current reality. And again, I can't emphasize enough how much learning from each other has enabled us to take some of those risks or make those changes within our own programming, because there's a lot to relearn.
Yeah, great.
One of the things that I've seen that has really kind of surprised me, and I've never been a fan of one-way circuits through any exhibit experience, because I tend to believe more in free choice, if you will, for visitors. And people will always find their way to come in the back way. And yet to see zoos pivot, if you will, to making sure that visitors' safety and their comfort, that zoos have that topmost in mind, and being able to change those experiences to make them one way and to make them meaningful for their guests one way, and give them that comfort that they're not going to be surprised, that they will have the best experience possible. I think it has a lot of implications for us as we rethink things in the beginning. And I was talking with the architects at EHDD number of months ago, and they were talking about, well, do you think that we're going to have to take this into consideration in the future, and that we have everybody spaced 6 feet apart, and we're going to have to make our aquariums bigger? And I'm going, oh my God, it's hard to afford aquariums as it is right now with the constant reinvestment. We couldn't possibly make them bigger and still be able to afford them in a sustainable manner. So I think rethinking how our visitors engage with us is going to be really key and critical to the future success.
Yep. Great thought. Grayson, I know you have your hand up. Would you like to offer a comment?
So there's 2 things that I've been thinking a lot about, both in terms of zoos and more generally in terms of the pandemic, that we've learned that we don't really seem to talk about. One is, first I will preface this by saying that a few weeks ago, my zoo made 2 really hard decisions, that we were going to close our monorail ride, which has been running for 30 years. Frankly, it was at the end of its lifespan already. It only ran 8 out of 52 weeks last year and was really expensive, but it's still hard for the people whose animals can only be seen on that ride. And we decided to close the Children's Aquarium at Fair Park, which had never made money, but the city of Dallas had always bailed us out every year, and they decided not to. And the situation, I'm really seeing a generational divide in how we deal with this, both for that instance and broadly. I feel like a lot of people my age, especially of I'll own it, demographics like mine, haven't really experienced a lot of adversity like this before. And because they haven't experienced it, they aren't conditioned to accept it, and they don't handle it well. You'll see this both with the pandemic and with what's going on racial and equity wise in our country. While I see a lot of older generations have much more of an it is what it is, pay your dues kind of mentality to it. And we have obviously on our staffs people that deal with both. So I think one of the most hard and interesting things to see is now my generation is dealing with adversity in this way, and they're learning, but yet they're still handling it in a very different way than the older generations. And I think because we have that mentality of adversity is not acceptable, we've got to find a way to solve it, that we could potentially have more solutions, and that our um, older generations are being forced to become more sympathetic to this handling of adversity. The other thing I'm really seeing is this is one of the few times in our recent history where everything we've known about our behavior and how we do things is out the window. There's a lot of things that we've always done because we've always done them, and this is really forcing us to question things. I've always felt our field has really thrived off of innovation and rebuilding itself. I mean, of course, Becca would point out that we're kind of at a similar place to where we were in the 70s when the Endangered Species Act was really making us rethink zoos, and the Jones and Jones was beginning to work on how to redesign zoos. Can we take this as the same opportunity we had 45 years ago where David Hancock's John Coe, Grant Jones, and Dennis Paulson sat around and came up with the Woodland Park Zoo 1976 master plan as something totally new and different to address the challenges of the time. So I really see we have an opportunity here for people to break both in and out of our industry, to really break their habits, re-examine what they're doing, and figure out how to make it better than ever before. Sorry for that rant.
Thanks, Grayson. Really, really good comments, though, and appreciate that perspective. One of the questions that was in the chat was, what's happening in terms of revenue potential from smaller experiences and even virtual experiences. Anybody seen any good returns or demand for these programs that could generate higher revenue, but with smaller numbers, given the pandemic? Anything out there that you've seen?
This is Charles here. I think that was Grayson's earlier question. It's a great question. No, I haven't, and that's the honest truth. But what I have seen is with the visitors that are coming to support us, there is a higher threshold, or for what they're willing to spend with us inside of our building. So our per cap numbers at any given experience, whether that's photos or a retail store, have almost been double at this point. And so while that's not meeting the normal revenue numbers, we do see a lot of support coming from these different revenue streams. When you get to virtual engagement opportunities, I think that's a case by case basis. So if anyone else on this call has a different variation of this than we do in Seattle, please feel free. But we had plans to engage on a VR experience at the Seattle Aquarium. That was set to open in March, but with the high risk for contact COVID exposure through contact of different surfaces, we decided not to use that. And I don't know when that's going to come back online, right? So, you have to figure out what's going to be safe, where there's areas that you can engage and look at other opportunities. Vancouver Aquarium, I know they're going through some difficult times right now, but also are a great resource and a great colleagues in our industry. And they shared with us an opportunity for a way to drive revenue through an online coloring app with a company called Tangible Interactions. And we've been exploring that. That hasn't launched yet, but we'll see what the success of that is. But there's no silver bullet that I've heard of quite yet for ways to engage. But I just as a follow-up, I think one of the examples in Grayson's question was that SeaWorld does something similar to this with Discovery Cove. So I think there's plenty of opportunity out there, with the sharing and collaborative discussions like this. I just haven't heard of it myself.
Thanks, Charles. Good thoughts. Rich Burgle, you have your hand up for a comment or a question. North Carolina.
Yeah, just in response to your question, we had really good success with putting all our summer camps online. So we did totally virtual summer camps, and we had equivalent or greater attendance, for lack of a better term, and generated, I think, actually slightly more money than our camps did last year. And that was with sort of throwing it together at the last minute and not marketing it as consistently and for as long a period as we would have for the in-person camps. So it's definitely possible. And I mean, our approach has mostly been to offer virtual programs for free in order to sort of meet people's needs during this difficult time, at least initially, but we're very much now transitioning to having more for-fee virtual programs, whether it's invite an ambassador animal to your Zoom call or whatever, because I think there even though we are open again, I think there is still a market for that stuff out there.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for sharing that. I know we're coming up on our closing time, and we'd like to stick to our 60 minutes because I know you all have other Zoom calls and other meetings to jump to, but any last thoughts by any of the panelists that you'd like to share quickly before we wrap up?
Yes, pick me. I can't speak loudly enough or often enough about the need to have good, high quality remote conversations, conference calls, good, high quality digital access, and the need for great facilitation and technical backup. This kind of stuff is not going to disappear. And if we think that we can get by on, taking snapshots or looking just in our cell phone to one another, we're dreaming there. So we've got to take seriously about the quality of what's going on in order that we can better communicate with one another.
That's great. Yeah, good advice and really smart advice, Becca. Well, thank you all again for joining us today, and thanks for our panelists, Charles, Becca, Shareen, and Richard, and also Jackie for co-moderating with me and sharing her thoughts. We will be doing this again next week. I'll share that screen. Next week, we're going to talk about channeling your inner peacock, communicating your worth to your community, talking about how to really get out there to your community and talk about what you do, but also from a funding perspective. We have a lobbyist that's going to be joining us, as well as a communications professional and a couple Zoo folks. So thank you all for being part of it, and look forward to seeing you in an upcoming session. And have a great day. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, all. Charles, I'll find you and we'll meet.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.